first get a stump in, it usually is pretty rough on the surface. A lot of times whoever's making the cut can only make the cut through the log in 2 passes, and that usually ends up leaving a big step in the surface of the log. So I have to come up with a way to be able to smooth this out and flatten this whole top. And I've seen jigs where you can set up rails and then have a flattening jig with a router, you know, that has a whole apparatus. I don't have the space or the time to make anything like that right now, but I do have an idea of a flattening jig that just references off of a good surface. So as long as you have a starting surface, you should be able to reference off the rest. I don't know what you would call it. It could be called a flattening jig or a planing jig. I am going to use my router, and let me show you how I put that together. So really all it takes is one piece of wood to make this jig work. I have this angle sled that I use on my table saw, and it'll be fine to use. I'll just pull off these stops that I have attached on this face, and then I'm going to attach my router to this side, and this little runner here that I've attached to run on my table saw will act as a stiffening brace for this new purpose that I'm going to be using it for. Of course, you could use anything. You could make your own dedicated jig out of this. I just don't really know how well this is going to work yet, and I don't have my 3/4 inch plywood handy right now since I am in the process of moving into a new shop. But like I said, this ought to work just fine. Okay, over here at the bandsaw, I'm going to cut a little V-shaped notch in this wood in order to make clearance for the router bit. Now to set up my router, I'm going to take the base plate off of it, and I'm going to insert this 1/2 inch straight cutting bit. Any straight bit can work. I've got, you know, a 3/4 inch pattern bit that would work just fine. I've got a smaller, I don't know if that's maybe a 3/8 inch, maybe that's 1/2 inch. That's 1/2 inch just on a 1/4 inch collet, and it's shorter. To give myself maximum reach, I am going to use this one. Just of note, depending on the thickness of the material you're trying to cut, the thickness of the sled that you use will help you determine that. So I'll be able to flatten this only up to 3/4 of an inch, and hopefully my demonstration will show you why that is. So I'm going to switch these out, and then I'll get back to you. Okay, now I've got the base plate taken off, and I have my 1/2 inch straight router bit installed. What I have to do now is turn the router over, get the bit centered in this groove, and attach the router to the jig. Now this is an older Craftsman router, and the router is great. The adjustment mechanism is atrocious. So when I do get my fixed router table in place, this router is going to be the one that goes into it, because right now, as it is, I can barely adjust it. There we go. Now I'm going to turn the router so I get at least 3 screws into the base. I really should get this in frame for you. If I have the router like this with the handles straight, I can only get 2 screws in. If I turn it, I don't know, about 45 degrees, I'm able to get 3 screws in, and that ought to make a stable enough connection to where this won't wobble around at all. Alright, well, I'm going to give these 1-inch long Kreg screws a shot and trying to get it in here. They may just be barely too long, but I guess we'll find out. It's all I have right now, so hopefully it'll work. Okay, let me show you what I have going on here. If you look, the plane of this fence here is behind the bit. And so when I extend that bit down, it will be able to cut, but not too deep, because I don't want this to kind of get out of control, you know. It should only be able to dig in 1/2 inch into the material that I'm working on. So now what I need to do is lower this down flush with the table, lock it in place, and now it's ready to go. I did, just for full disclosure, I was only able to get 2 screws into the base, but it shouldn't matter. It seems pretty sturdy the way it is. So it's pretty rough, but it gets me to within what I can do to finish it with some 80 grit, 60 grit sandpaper. So it took that step right out of this wood. Keep in mind, I've never done this before. I don't claim to be the first person to come up with this idea. I just haven't done any research. It's just an idea that I came up with while I was trying to figure out how I was going to flatten out this stump.